They told me there were 33 degrees, 33 steps to enlightenment, each one a layer closer to the truth, hidden beneath symbols, rituals, and silence. For most men, reaching the final degree is the end of a lifetime's journey. But for me, it was only the beginning of something I was never meant to see. The night I completed the 33rd, the air inside the lodge felt heavier than usual, almost suffocating. Candles burned lower, as if reluctant to stay lit. I remember the Grand Master's words clearly. "You have ascended, brother. There are no more doors beyond this one." He lied. When I returned home, I placed my regalia neatly on the table. Apron folded, gloves white as bone, the scent of wax and dust still clinging to them. My mind should have been at peace, but there was a weight pressing against it, a question I couldn't silence. Why, after all those years, did I still feel like I was being watched? It was past midnight when the knock came, not on my door, on my window. I remember the sound distinctly, 3 soft taps, rhythmic, deliberate. When I looked outside, there was no one, just fog drifting across the street lamps. But on the window pane, pressed against the glass from outside, was an envelope, perfectly sealed, black wax glinting under the yellow light. I hesitated before opening it. The seal wasn't like any I'd ever seen. The familiar square and compass were reversed, forming a spiral around a single number, 34. Inside there was no signature, just a line written in elegant cursive, "You've been seen." And beneath it, an address. One that didn't exist on any map. I spent the next day pretending the letter didn't exist. I went about my duties, exchanged polite words with brothers at the lodge, even laughed when someone mentioned that some men claimed there was a hidden degree. But that laugh tasted wrong, because the thought wouldn't leave me alone. That night, I checked the address again. It led to the outskirts of town, near the old observatory, a place abandoned for decades after a fire. I told myself I was going only to prove it was a hoax, that someone was playing a cruel joke. Still, I packed a flashlight and my gloves. The road grew quieter as I drove further. The city lights disappeared behind me, replaced by a pale moon and the rhythmic hum of my tires on cracked asphalt. The observatory stood like a blind eye against the hill, its dome shattered, ivy swallowing the brick walls. The gate was chained, but the lock had already been broken. Someone wanted me to come in. I followed a faint path around the building, guided only by my flashlight beam and the eerie echo of my footsteps. Then I saw it, a stairway carved into the ground, half covered by roots and soil. A faint draught of cold air breathed from below, carrying the smell of damp stone and candle smoke. There shouldn't have been light down there, but there was. I descended carefully, each step slick with moisture. The air grew colder, thicker. My light flickered against walls, lined with old Masonic carvings, symbols I recognized, but inverted, twisted, rearranged into patterns that made my vision blur if I looked too long. At the bottom, the passage opened into a vast chamber. It was silent, the kind of silence that hums in your ears. The architecture was unmistakably Masonic. Pillars of black stone, arches carved with Latin inscriptions, but every familiar shape seemed corrupted. The compass and square symbols were flipped upside down. Where the G should have been, there was a spiral carved into the wall, faintly glowing gold. At the center of the room stood a single wooden chair, facing a mirror taller than a man. That was it. No altar, no candles, no people, just the chair and the mirror. I whispered into the room, just to break the silence. "Is anyone here?" No answer, but as my voice echoed, the mirror shimmered slightly, as if something behind it had shifted. My flashlight dimmed. For a moment I thought I saw movement, a shadow forming inside the reflection that didn't match my own. I stepped closer, trying to convince myself it was just the light. The surface looked ancient, almost metallic, rippling faintly like water. My breath fogged the glass, but the reflection didn't fog with it. That S, when I noticed the inscription carved into the chair, S backrest, unbuild the self. The words sent a shiver through me. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't. Curiosity, that fatal, sacred curiosity that every Mason carries, pulled me closer. I reached out to touch the surface of the mirror. It was warm, too warm. Then behind me, I heard footsteps, soft, bare, moving in a slow, deliberate circle around me. I turned, but no one was there. The air rippled slightly as though something unseen was walking through it. I could feel it, the pressure of presence, the faint shift in the air like standing too close to electricity. And then, in the mirror, the reflection of a man appeared behind me. He was wearing my robes, my gloves, but his face was hidden in shadow. When I spun around again, the space was empty. The mirror now showed only me, but the reflection was smiling. Every instinct told me to leave, to run, but I couldn't. My body felt rooted, heavy, like the air had turned to glass around me. The reflection raised its hand slowly until its palm rested on the mirror. Without thinking, I mirrored the gesture. Our hands aligned perfectly. The moment my skin met the glass, a pulse ran through it, a low vibration that climbed up my arm and into my skull. My vision flashed white. I saw geometric patterns, golden spirals blooming inside darkness, folding endlessly inward. And then a voice, calm, deep, emotionless. You've reached the end of the known degrees. Do you wish to ascend beyond the veil? I couldn't speak. My throat was locked, my heart hammering so fast I thought it would burst. The voice spoke again, closer now. If you seek the 34th, sit. The mirror went dark, swallowing my reflection entirely. And in that silence, I sat down in the chair. When I sat in that chair, my reflection smiled before I did. I didn't even realize it at first. The movements were so perfectly synchronized that the difference seemed like an illusion. But once you notice a delay like that, even half a second, it changes the way you breathe. It's like realizing the thing staring back at you isn't mimicking you anymore. It's watching. The chair was cold at first, though the air around it pulsed with heat. I could hear faint whispering from behind the walls, like 1,000 voices reciting prayers at once, their tone flat and rhythmic, mechanical almost. The mirror stood before me, black and perfectly still, reflecting nothing but the shape of the chamber. I tried to speak, to ask who was there, but my voice wouldn't leave my throat. Instead, the sound came from somewhere else, from the mirror itself. It spoke with my voice. "Brother, you have entered the 34th degree." I froze. The reflection began to take form again, its surface bending, light folding into a faint image. It was me, but there was something wrong with the eyes. They glowed faintly gold, like candlelight trapped behind glass. It leaned forward slightly, even though I hadn't moved. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The reflection's expression was calm, too calm. It looked at me the way a teacher studies a student before a final exam. Then the voice spoke again, this time from behind the mirror. Deep, resonant, and layered with what sounded like dozens of other tones whispering in unison. You have built yourself through ritual, through order, through will. Now you must unbuild it. The light in the chamber dimmed until the only thing visible was that glowing outline of my reflection. I could feel my heartbeat in my palms. The symbols carved into the walls began to shift, lines rearranging themselves into new patterns. Golden geometry rippled like water, flowing toward the mirror until the entire surface shimmered with it. The voice continued, rhythmic now, as if reciting from an ancient text. You were never a man. You are a pattern that believes it is solid. You are the echo of an idea that forgot its source. The words made my head ache. It felt as though something inside my skull was being pulled apart, rewritten. I pressed my palms to my temples, trying to stay grounded. Suddenly, the mirror flashed bright, and scenes began to appear, moments from my life. My first initiation, the shaking of hands, the burning candles, then my marriage, my wife smiling under sunlight, my father's funeral. Each scene appeared and dissolved like film reels burning in slow motion. But then they started to change. In each memory, there was a figure standing behind me, a faint silhouette, always watching, always still. In my initiation, he stood among the masters, head slightly tilted. At my wedding, he was at the back of the crowd. In my father's funeral, he stood beside me, unseen by everyone else. His outline pulsed with golden light. The voice spoke again, this time softer. He has always been there. He is you, unbuilt. The reflection smiled wider now, tilting its head exactly the way that shadow did. Its hand lifted slowly, reaching toward me. I could feel the pull from the glass, a faint magnetic drag in the air. I tried to stand, but my body wouldn't respond. My muscles trembled as though every movement needed permission. Then the mirror rippled again, and the reflection began to speak on its own. Its mouth moved, but not in sync with the words. You think you're watching a ritual, but this is not initiation, it is undoing. The chamber shook faintly. Dust fell from the ceiling. The geometry on the walls brightened until the room glowed gold and white. I couldn't tell if I was inside the chamber anymore or inside the reflection itself. My surroundings stretched, folded, inverted. For a moment, I saw hundreds of chairs identical to mine arranged in a vast circle, each with someone seated, each person staring into their own mirror. And every reflection smiled. The voice shifted tone, deeper now, almost compassionate. Every mason builds the temple within. You have spent your life constructing yours with ritual and faith. The 34th degree is not about building, it is about demolition. The mirror darkened until I could see only my own faint outline. If you wish to ascend, the voice whispered, you must let go of the man who's watching. I didn't understand what it meant until my reflection started to move on its own. Slowly, deliberately, it leaned forward, pressing its palm against the glass again. But this time its hand didn't stop. It began to push through. The surface rippled like liquid, and its fingers emerged, pale and cold, dripping faint light. The air crackled with static as the hand reached toward me. I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything but sit there frozen, but something deeper kept me rooted. I could feel my own heartbeat sinking with the pulse from the mirror. The hand touched my cheek. The sensation was like ice and fire at once. My vision blurred, my hearing faded. I felt myself splitting in two, half of me watching from the chair, half of me standing inside the glass, looking back. In the reflection, I saw the chamber from the other side. The mirror wasn't a surface anymore. It was a window. Behind it, countless others stood in identical halls, each staring at their own counterpart. I realized what I was seeing weren't other people. They were fragments, pieces of me. The voice filled the space, now inside my head. Do not resist. You are observing the construction of the original design. Then everything went silent. Completely silent. I couldn't even hear my own breathing. The reflection's eyes dimmed, and for a moment it was just me again, but then without warning it grinned, and my own face didn't. That's when I knew I'd crossed a line I couldn't return from. The reflection reached forward again, and the glass began to melt outward like molten gold. I stood instinctively, stepping back, but the chair behind me moved on its own, scraping against the floor and blocking my path. The reflection's grin widened until it split unnaturally, stretching from ear to ear. A whisper crawled through the chamber like a breeze. You are no longer outside. The glass flashed white. My body jolted violently, every nerve screaming as though I'd been struck by lightning. Then, nothing. I opened my eyes to darkness. The mirror was gone. The chair was gone. The entire chamber had changed. The stone walls were bare, and the air was heavy and still. The silence was no longer peaceful, it was oppressive, alive. And that was when I realized the truth. The ritual hadn't ended. It had only changed its shape. They said silence was sacred, but in that place, silence screamed. It pressed against my ears until I could hear my own blood moving, every heartbeat echoing like a drum in an empty cathedral. I opened my eyes, expecting the mirror, the chair, the voice. But there was nothing, only smooth, colorless walls and a faint golden haze hanging in the air like dust suspended in still water. My first thought was that I was dead. My second was that I wasn't alone. The chamber didn't have doors or corners. It curved endlessly, an unbroken circle. When I tried to speak, no sound came out. My throat moved, but the air absorbed every vibration, swallowing my words before they reached my ears. I started to panic. I slammed my fist against the wall, but even that made no noise. The impact rippled through my arm instead, like I had punched the surface of a dream. Then I heard it, the faint hum. It wasn't coming from outside, but from within me, a low resonance vibrating through my chest, steady and mechanical. I recognized it immediately. It was the sound I had heard during the ritual, the tone that aligned with my heartbeat. I pressed my hand to my sternum. The hum responded, syncing perfectly, growing louder until it filled the chamber entirely. The walls began to glow faintly, revealing carvings that hadn't been there before. They spiraled outward, forming geometric shapes I'd seen in the lodge. Except these symbols were reversed, as if someone had carved them from the inside out. The light pulsed in rhythm with my breath. When I inhaled, the patterns expanded. When I exhaled, they contracted. I was the chamber. My reflection's voice returned, not through sound, but through thought, slipping into my consciousness like a whisper I couldn't block out. Silence is the first veil. To unbuild the self, you must erase the noise of what you call reality. I tried to respond, to demand an explanation, but the voice only deepened, splitting into layers. You still believe you are a man. You are a sound pretending to be solid. You are geometry pretending to be flesh. The words made my vision pulse. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head as flashes of gold light bled into my mind. I saw myself standing in the lodge, surrounded by the brothers, but each one wore my face. Their mouths moved in unison, speaking in reversed Latin, the words of oaths I had once sworn now twisting into gibberish. I understood none of it, yet every syllable burned behind my eyes like truth I had forgotten. My body began to dissolve around the edges, fingers fading, edges flickering like film burning through a projector. I screamed, but no sound came. The chamber responded instead. The glow from the walls brightened, and for a moment the silence cracked. I heard a single whisper, my own voice. "Welcome to the 34th. Then the light snapped out, and the chamber plunged into darkness again. I crawled along the wall, searching for anything, an exit, a door, something physical, but every direction felt the same. Then my hand brushed against something cold and smooth. The mirror. Except this one wasn't silver or glass. It was pitch black like obsidian. My reflection was gone. The surface reflected only absence. I stared into it for what felt like hours. Then the surface began to ripple. From the darkness within, faint images flickered. My life again, but fragmented, distorted. I saw myself shaking hands with the Grand Master, except this time his eyes were empty sockets glowing faint gold. I saw my wife asleep beside me, her face slowly shifting into mine. I saw myself writing this confession in a room I didn't recognize. Every version of me was watching another version. That's when I realized what the 34th degree was. It wasn't a ritual, it was recursion. The mirror pulsed. I reached out, but before I could touch it, hands pressed against the other side, hundreds of them overlapping, clawing, desperate. They belonged to me, every one of them. Each hand carried the same faint burn mark on the palm, the circle ID received after touching the first mirror. They were trying to get out, or maybe trying to pull me in. The hum returned, louder this time, forming words through vibration. You have built too many reflections. One must remain. I understood then. The ritual wasn't about learning or ascending. It was about compression. The 34th degree wasn't something added to the others. It was the deletion of all that came before, the unmaking of the man who thought he'd learned. The chamber began to spin. The black mirror expanded, stretching across the walls until I was standing inside it, surrounded by infinite versions of myself, each one slightly out of sync, blinking at different intervals, moving with different hesitation. It felt like watching 1,000 lives unfold simultaneously, all anchored to one mistake: curiosity. Then, one by one, the reflections began to vanish. Some faded quietly, others twisted and crumbled into dust. The air grew heavy, suffocating. I tried to hold on, to stay conscious, but I could feel something pulling at me, unraveling every memory, every thought, every identity I'd ever built. The voice returned, closer now, almost gentle. There is no brotherhood here. There is no hierarchy. There is only the pattern, and you were never outside it. I sank to the floor, trembling. My reflection, the last one left, stepped forward from the dark wall. It reached out its hand. This time I didn't resist. When our palms met, the chamber exploded in light. For an instant I saw everything. The geometry of the universe folding inwards, golden threads connecting every motion, every breath, every thought I'd ever had. It was beautiful, terrifyingly beautiful. Then it all collapsed. The light folded into a single point and vanished. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in my apartment. The air was still. Morning light filtered through the curtains. My reflection looked back at me from the mirror above my desk, perfectly normal, except it was smiling. I reached for my phone, but the time display was wrong, stuck at 3:33 a.m. My hands were trembling, and on my right palm, faintly burned into the skin, was the same circular mark. I tried to convince myself it had been a hallucination, a dream induced by exhaustion or ritual intensity. But when I blinked, my reflection didn't. Its lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. Then faintly, through the silence, I heard a single phrase echo inside my mind. "You are not yet done." The silence returned, thicker than before, and somewhere, deep behind the glass, I heard my own voice answer. They said I'd been missing for 2 days, but I remember centuries. The light that filled my apartment that morning felt wrong, too clean, too still. It wasn't sunlight. It was something pretending to be. My first breath after waking tasted metallic, like the air inside a sealed vault. I stumbled to the bathroom mirror, half expecting not to see myself at all. But I did. My reflection stood there, calm, composed, watching me. It blinked when I did. For a moment, I almost believed everything that had happened was a hallucination. Then I looked at my hands. The circular burn was still there, faint but glowing beneath the skin, pulsing like a heartbeat. I touched it and felt warmth radiate up my arm, the same vibration that had filled the chamber. I backed away from the mirror, shaking. My apartment was exactly as I'd left it. Clothes folded, books stacked, the lodge documents neatly placed on the table. Except one of them was new. A single black envelope lay at the center. The same kind of seal, a reversed compass spiraling into the number 34. I didn't open it. I couldn't. My mind was still half stuck in the chamber, half here. The silence from that place hadn't left me. It followed me like a residue, coating every sound in the room. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed wrong, too steady, almost mechanical. The phone rang once that afternoon. It was one of the brothers, Samuel. He sounded cautious, his voice trembling in ways I'd never heard before. "We were worried," he said. "You didn't show up to the post-ceremony meeting. The Grand Master said you never came home." I told him I had. He went quiet for a long time, then whispered, "No, brother, we checked. Your car was still outside the lodge." My chest tightened. I looked out the window. My car was right there, parked exactly where I'd left it. But something about its reflection in the glass was off. The shadow beneath it flickered faintly, like a glitch. I turned back to the phone. "Samuel," I said, "tell me something. Does the 34th degree mean anything to you?" The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Then he spoke, barely audible. "Who told you that?" Before I could answer, the line went dead. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the golden spiral. It spun behind my eyelids, whispering patterns I couldn't forget. Around 3 in the morning, I heard movement in the hallway outside my apartment. Slow footsteps, measured, familiar. When I looked through the peephole, the corridor was empty, but on the door, pressed flat against the wood, was another envelope. This one was unsealed. Inside was a small black card, with a single sentence written in silver ink. "Reflections cannot exist without their source." The air turned cold, the lights flickered, and in that instant I saw it, my reflection, not in the mirror this time, but in the glass of the window beside the door. It was standing behind me. I spun around, but the room was empty. The reflection lingered a moment longer, before fading back into the glass, smiling faintly, lips forming words I couldn't hear. By morning, I'd stopped trusting what I saw. Shadows didn't match their objects. Reflections lingered longer than movements. Every mirror in the apartment carried a delay, sometimes a fraction of a second, sometimes more. I began to notice small inconsistencies. The clocks ticking, looping irregularly, the sunlight coming from the wrong direction, my own breath forming fog when the air was warm. I decided to go back to the lodge. I needed to know if anyone else remembered. When I arrived, the building was empty, its doors unlocked but the lights off. Dust coated the altar, the air thick with the scent of wax and old stone. I walked through the hallways until I reached the main chamber. There, at the center of the floor, was a spiral carved freshly into the stone, identical to the one I'd seen in the underground hall. But this one pulsed faintly, golden veins of light running through it like liquid fire. I knelt down, tracing the edge with my gloved finger. The hum returned, deep and resonant, vibrating up through the floor. My vision flickered. The walls around me seemed to bend, elongate. I felt like I was falling again, the same endless descent from before. Then, from the shadows beyond the altar, a figure stepped forward. A man. He was wearing my face, not a reflection, not an illusion, a perfect copy. His robes were dark, lined with faint geometric patterns that pulsed with the same golden light. He smiled softly, the way my reflection had in the mirror. "You left early," he said, his voice calm, familiar. "The ritual wasn't finished." I couldn't move. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper. He tilted his head slightly. "The question isn't who I am," he said, "but which of us you are." He stepped closer, and I felt the air around me shift, thickening with energy. "You saw beyond the veil," he continued, "but you didn't understand it. You thought the 34th degree was a secret to uncover. It isn't, it's a correction." He reached out, touching the mark on my palm. The moment his skin met mine, pain shot through my arm and my vision blurred. I saw flashes, my life again, the lodge, the chamber, the mirror, but this time every moment doubled. 2 versions of me in every memory, one watching, one acting. "You've been walking in both worlds," he said softly. "Now one must remain." The spiral on the floor began to spin, faster and faster, golden light flooding the room until the entire lodge glowed. The air crackled with soundless thunder. My double stepped back, vanishing into the light. The hum grew deafening, yet I could still hear the faint echo of his words. Unbuild the self. When the light faded, I was alone again. The chamber was empty. The spiral on the floor was gone. My reflection in the polished stone no longer smiled. It only stared, perfectly in sync. I left the lodge at dawn, though the sky above me was dark, stars unmoving. It's been weeks now, or maybe hours. Time doesn't flow the same anymore. Sometimes I catch glimpses of myself in places I've never been, in reflections of windows, phone screens, puddles. They stare back, calm, patient, waiting. I've tried to destroy the mirrors in my apartment, but new ones appear in the glass of picture frames, in the sheen of my coffee, in the shadows of my walls. I don't know which version of me is writing this. Maybe the one that sat in the chair, maybe the one that never left the chamber, maybe the one that replaced him. If you're reading this, if you ever hear whispers about the 34th degree, don't look for it, don't try to ascend. Some doors aren't meant to open because once you step through, you don't come back, you multiply. They said I'd been missing for 2 days, but I know the truth. I never left.